Welcome, folks. Welcome back to Discard the Compass. And I'm John Lynch, of course, as you know by now. And we have two great guests with me today. Richrads Sylvester, who I've been tracking for a while, and newly Dawn Garland, who's been on the scene. And Dawn is Richrads' partner. This is going to be a fascinating conversation because I've never interviewed two people who are in the non-dual scene. So we'll see how we go. How are you both? Welcome.
Yeah, we're good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah.
Great. Where do you start talking about this stuff? I suppose people just want to know about what happened. Richard, you had an experience in the railway station and such, and another profound one after that. Yeah. Could you just go over that a little bit for us?
A little bit, yeah. I'll try and keep it short. So there were about 30 years of rather fun-filled and desperate spiritual seeking, which kind of petered out. And then there was going to non-duality meetings. And then there was a kind of a flash of something which I can't describe because nobody can. Yeah, which the important thing about that was obviously it happened at a railway station. Yeah. And I sell the information about which railway station it was for huge sums of money. And then I'd say there was a year of despair, which talking to a lot of people since then seems to be fairly common. And then there was, I don't know what to call it, I'll just call it another opening, after which I'm just going to say it was all over. And if we want to go into that in any more detail about what it was that was all over or what any of that means, then we can come back to it and talk about it more. But I think I'll leave it at that very brief description for now. And I know a lot of people who are, who might listen to this might, find at least some of that familiar from their own experience. Yeah.
Dawn, and yourself, what happened or what didn't happen or such?
Well, initially, so I didn't know really anything about non-duality. So there was just one day where I noticed that I wasn't thought. And I thought, that's weird. Everybody must know this. And then I think about around the same time, I was like, there's no person, there's no body, there's nothing. So the whole physical seemed to have almost evaporated. And there was this and I thought something awful had happened. So this kind of equilibrium kind of set in. But I'd kind of lost it was almost like rudderless life. So all my desires kind of fell away. And so I was just going through life. And about a year later, I think maybe, I did come across non-duality. I had about a couple of months later, I had the sort of seeing of love, and it just seemed like a sort of stepping into sanity. So the mind just went, and there was seeing of nothing and everything, and there was just love, and it just blew me apart. I couldn't understand language initially, and it actually happened when I was in a restaurant. So I was with my partner at the time, and I was just sort of sitting there going, I could see him talking, and it was just like, my God, how small speech was. Like there's this, and then there's somebody trying to talk about something so serious, and it's like, wow, but it's no word could touch this. So I was just blown apart, and the mind kind of fell away and didn't come back. I mean, I had virtually no thought at all for a few years, and now it kind of comes and goes. But yeah, so a lot of time spent sitting on benches or just staring out windows. Yeah, very nice. Very nice.
That's fascinating.
It took a long time to know what the hell had happened. There's a lot of doubt and all that as well. But
yeah. You mentioned something about language not being able to describe this, which makes sense in a particular way, because how can you describe something that's greater than the mind in a way? Suzanne Segal, she had a story of an awakening. It just reminded me of that. But hers was a terrifying experience, trying to integrate this as such. And she got help from psychotherapists, and you're a psychotherapist, I think, yourselves as well. And so you'd have an insight into things. But this was even greater than anything that could be taught about the mind and stuff. How did you deal with that? Dawn? Like, how did you integrate it? Did you get, or was it terrifying? Was it an easy experience? Like,
it was easy, as in, I was just so beyond any struggle. But to actually talk about this and own it was very difficult, because I just didn't. I just couldn't own it, and I couldn't talk about it, and I didn't talk about it. And then it was only about 2.5 years ago, really, I started being more open about it, because it was after a series of visions and other kind of energetic phenomenon that there was this massive integration that kind of took place, and it just really changed me. I mean, the psychological stuff really, really changed to make me, I think I got in touch with other feelings that I had, and it made me kind of fearless to talk about this in a way, like, whereas before I'd been held back. It's like, this is not something that I should, I don't know, I had a lot of inhibition about talking about it. So that's out the window now, sort of. Yeah.
Richard he's not going to tell me what that railway station is. I'm trying to guess here, but anyway, Richard, you had a second.
Anybody out there, all you have to do is buy the book.
But secondly, you had another experience after the first thing that happened at the railway station, and it was sort of, Dawn reminded me that it sort of integrated you into your current way of life, you could call it,
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I mean, the way I describe it, and I mean, I know the trouble is, this happens in so many different ways for so many different individuals. But I know also that what happened here was fairly common. I've talked to quite a few people who've experienced it in the same way. It's like there can be this initial opening, and the way I describe it is, it's the emptiness of everything is seen. And the importance of that maybe partly is the emptiness of this, the emptiness of the self. So it's everything that seems to be out there, which is the world, but also everything that seems to be in here, which is the self, is just completely empty. And it's a hell of a shock, and it can bring about huge kind of changes, but it's incomplete. And so it can often leave the individual, as it did with me, in despair, because it's like there's been a glimpse of something which has then been taken away. But in the realization that comes in that glimpse, it's like seeing that there's nothing I can do to get back to that. All those years of spiritual seeking, I thought there's something I can do to get to some, whatever the goal is. I don't know what it is, but it's out there, and there's something I can do to get to it. And in that split second of opening, it's like, oh my God, there's nobody in here who can do anything. So I think that's what kind of accounts for the despair that sometimes felt. And then later on here, as with many other individuals, there's just a kind of, all I can say is a sort of fuller opening. And I suppose the heart of that, what seems to make it different, the easiest way I can say it is that in that fuller opening, love is seen. And it turns out that's what was missing from the first opening. First opening, it's kind of, wow, amazing, but love isn't seen. And in that second opening, love is seen. And whatever happens after that, it just seems to bring an end to seeking. There's just no possibility of, well, here anyway, there just seems to be no possibility of seeking after that, whatever happens. Yeah.
So pre-event, you could say, you're being done. We're always being done. Would that be the take by the two of you?
We're always being done.
Like by a power greater than ourselves as such? Than the ego, the apparent person?
Yeah, it's a way of putting it. Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I think that's part of the shock for me, is that sense of, oh my God, there was never anybody here doing it. So yeah, this was always, if you like, being done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that emptiness thing, I mean, it's not pleasant without the fullness. I mean, it's just not, there's nothing pleasant about it. at all, or interesting actually. In that, for me, I don't see that as, people are quite fascinated by that aspect of things, but in a way, it's very the love's the juicy bit, I guess. I mean, without that, it's actually quite dull, really. It is a loss, not an unpleasant loss, but it's strange. It is not pleasant and not unpleasant, I suppose.
It depends on the person's probably trajectory, where they're coming from, and the life they're living, maybe.
Yeah, maybe there's nothing. It's that weird thing of not being able to own anything, or it's strange, and then suddenly it isn't, because I think the love, because it brings the intimacy in, and that makes sense of everything. Without that, it's kind of is like a desert period.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned like intimacy. I like the phrase of "into me I see," and you mentioned there was feelings that you never knew you had before. Like that must be that must be really interesting, in fairness, to feel things you never felt before, to know aspects of yourself that you never thought were there as such.
Well, I was for a 10-year period. I really, really suffered. I mean, and I wasn't able to get close to anyone during that period. I'd really been wounded quite badly, and so the heart being open like that, suddenly I was able to do that. So it was such a relief in a way. It was like, for me, it was massive. But then then there's spiritual bypass as well, which I didn't realize about. Like that's massive. But then it doesn't, during that honeymoon period, it doesn't matter. I mean, I wouldn't be hard on anyone who just sinks into that, just sink into just being with the peace and just being with the love, because there's nothing to work with. There's nothing. You're just so empty, and just sitting on your arse is fantastic, And I think there's a lot of healing in just doing that. When you want to look at things, you look at things if you want to, but yeah.
That initial opening for me, one thing it did bring, it brought a huge amount of, like, I'm going to call it mental clarity. All sorts of things on a mind level just went bang, 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 bang into place. So all sorts of things that I puzzled over for years as a spiritual seeker suddenly kind of made sense, but there was just this is a kind of cold sort of emptiness. So there was a lot of sitting for me during that year, but it was a kind of sitting in despair. It wasn't a peaceful sitting. But then when the fullness had been seen, then, and in fact since then, there has been a strong tendency just to sit. And it's a kind of, it's amazing. I think I've sort of written about it and mentioned in talks quite often, just the sheer unbelievable joy of watching paint dry, sitting and watching paint dry. And I think I've even mentioned that sometimes I like watching paint that's already dried. Yeah. So there's no comparison between that kind of sitting in what was just emptiness and despair, and then the kind of sitting when fullness has been seen.
So you could say there's two aspects to awakening. I hate using the words awakening and things, but we have to put labels on stuff for people to understand. There's a sort of everything is nothing and everything is full. It kind of hinges around those two, does it? Seems to be that way.
Well, I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't have to be seen separately like that. I mean, I certainly talk to people where the whole thing's been apprehended in one, but that's sometimes what happens. Yeah.
Suffering is coming into my mind because people suffer. It isn't easy. Life isn't easy as such. I don't know who has it easy, but a lot of people reach for the path like I did through suffering. And it seems, you're put to the pin of your collar and there's no way out really as such. So you go looking for answers, maybe. I did anyway. And what can happen is some amazing things can happen. Psychotherapy is coming into my mind as well, because I think you're both psychotherapists. Am I right? Or is it Dawn? Dawn is the one. Yeah. Okay. So, that's to do with sort of, I call it trimming the branches of the ego, isn't it? In a way, or trying to build another bit of a foundation under the person as such, so they can live properly. But enlightenment is like taking it out by the root, isn't it? I mean, how can they be integrated in a way? Do you think?
You can still be looking at life through a distorted lens, like as in you can still be seeing reality through distorted, not reality as in big reality, as in nothing and everything, but so you could be, there's a lot of things that can, you could be blissed out, totally empty, not a thought in your head, and be open to love and have a loving relationship, but you won't be able to tell the difference between someone who's abusive and not abusive, or there's stuff like that needs to be corrected. Your idea of what's right and what's wrong and creating boundaries and all that sort of thing can be completely missing after this. So I think the finding your own kind of authenticity or your own kind of sovereignty is something you've got to do. Finding your own voice in this is actually something you've got to do, because I don't think everybody does do that. And I think that's why, people saying that consciousness is fundamental. And now more recently, people are coming and saying, well, that's not the case. There's a lot of change in what people are saying in non-dual circles as well. And I think actually really being true to your own experiences is something you've got to really think about, and and getting in touch with your emotions, your real experience is what gets you to that point. I think in my experience that's been that, and it goes with the literature, but
and that definitely is not spiritual bypassing that way, is it? That's really like hitting it full on.
Well, I did spiritual bypass, so but but anyone can. I think you can resolve these things much quicker after awakening. You can just see it, and it's like the process just happens. You can talk to people, whatever, but it can happen quite quickly. So.
Can I ask, what's it like to awakened people together? Because this is sort of a relationship that anybody would be enlightened would love to have, like two awakened souls together as such. Like life must be amazing in some respects to be on a level because Dawn's in touch, you're in touch with yourselves. I'm sort of fascinated by that aspect of the two of you. A usual relationship works on mind and what one person can do for the other, and sometimes it turns out into a business deal. If you're like this, I'll be like this. It gets it works in a dysfunctional pattern sometimes, maybe, that people fit together and they dysfunctionally fit together maybe. But in your case, you're operating from a different level altogether, I presume.
Well, I think that for me it would be, there's not the need. So there's no the neediness is kind of gone. So there's not this people are so texting each other, phoning each other, or all that kind of, what are you up to? That's not there. So it's a kind of relief to not have someone on your case all the time. I think it's a lot more straightforward in that sense. And also explaining the different states, because I'm gone in some samadhi fucking whatever Richard knows, and whereas I can't explain that to anybody else. No.
That's fascinating. Like Richard sitting on the chair, blissed out, and you're in samadhi somewhere in the kitchen. It's
or in a different chair in the same room. Yeah, I need to remember that. Yeah, that's what might be manifesting in another person. That might be manifesting something completely different, but with Dawn, it's a manifestation of a samadhi state. Yeah, I find it really, it's completely unlike any other relationship I've had, and it's difficult for me to put into words what that difference is. Obviously, also we are, with different personalities, and so obviously it's going to be, any relationship's going to be different to any other relationship, but there is something about this which is it's a bit like trying to explain, the impossibility of trying to explain what seeing this is like. It can't be done. It's also impossible for me to explain or describe what the difference is in this relationship to any relationship I've had previously. It's just, it's a different quality. And I could say it's like, well, there's something missing, but it's something which I'm very glad is missing. I mean, there's also something else which is present, which wasn't present in previous relationships, which I'm very glad is present. But, but don't ask me to explain what that is in either case. There's something that's missing, which I'm glad isn't there, and there's something that's present that I'm glad is there, because it just can't be put into words. Yeah.
Like there's a freedom, the freedom is coming up, and the neti approach that I think I picked up on it in a book of yours, Richard, I think. Well, that's what I read in it. No, that's what I picked up from it. It was about the loss of the person, I think it was what you said. And I kind of picked it up as like the neti approach to spirituality. A lot of that is like people have issues and things like that, and maybe even in relationships, and they need to like drop them or see through them, or maybe just take a general interest in fixing them. But the neti thing seems to be the basis of non-duality. Would I be right? And is that the right way to approach it? See what you're not.
You want to tackle that?
Whoever likes to come in, I don't mind. It's like
there's no way of approaching it, like seeing what you're not. Are you talking about the neti actual approach? I'm
not this. I'm not the body. I'm not the thought.
Yeah. No. But yeah, because I mean, I think if I'd have done a practice like that, I think that would have confused the hell out of me, But I can normally guess and things like self-inquiry and stuff, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone into self-inquiry a little bit, and I just find it completely baffling. I just think that is not something for me. Not this, not that kind of. I mean, if I called it a practice, again, I just feel like, whatever it holds for people, I am not one of the people that it holds anything for. But I do have a long history behind me of meditation, and I have loved meditation for a long time. What I would stop at, however, is I would not make any cause and effect connection between meditation or self-inquiry or anything like that, any practice. I wouldn't make a causal connection between any practice and, what happens, this kind of opening or awakening, whatever we want to call it, that happens. I think it's very tempting to make connections, but I'm unable to. And I think the core of why I'm unable to is because it seems to me that, part of the essence of that opening is to see that there never was anybody here who was ever doing anything. And so, whether this is seen or isn't seen doesn't seem to me to have anything to do with anything that this thought it was or thinks that it is. And that is kind of very challenging to the mind. And I've been involved in some pretty tough arguments with people around this, which is kind of quite natural.
It's difficult to describe life. I mean, we're human beings. We're sort of self-conscious, you could call it. And, nature sort of isn't, it seems, as such. Is that where we're going wrong? I mean, do we need to, how does someone approach this again? I mean, it's like people are trying to become something that they already are. Would I be right? They're already free. Would that be correct?
I mean, everything's already perfected in a sense, but then that's not recognized. And energetically, the shift is an energetic shift when it is recognized. So in a sense, nothing changes, but everything changes too. So there is, it's being released from the madness of the self and the self-obsession. That is the energetic shift. And it's just, then you're where you are, you're not somewhere else. So it's a relief, and that's the rest, and that's a peace, I would say.
And would there be natural programming left in the body after awakening as such? Like, I'm sort of a creative type, and that seems to be naturally, inherently there, something that won't shift, and it's fine, of course. But do you find there's some sort of inherent programming in people even after awakening? And what's the difference between the structure that fell away and what's left?
Well, program that falls away. I mean, I like to say a lot of things do fall away. It depends. If it's emotional, the heart being open solves a lot of problems. But like I say, if there's issues, there'll still be issues left in that. Like, so, you might have trauma responses. You might be a fawn response, or you might get emotional flashbacks still, which could obscure the fact that you're awake. I mean, some people get that. They could be in an abusive relationship and not even know they're awake because somebody is constantly triggering them. That can happen. So, so things like that can remain in the body because that's not in the mind as well. The trauma's in the body. So it can, and issues can remain. It depends what the issues are, but yeah. Mm.
Can I go back a step as well to what you're talking about just before that? Because in a sense, of course, yes, I mean, there is already and only freedom. Of course there is. But to say to someone where, that isn't being seen, well, this is already freedom, you are already free or whatever. I mean, it's, in a way, it's senseless, because it may be heard, but it can't be understood. Or it may be understood, but it can't be got, because it doesn't really matter whether it's understood on a mind level anyway. That's irrelevant. And so, there is a kind of, there is a trend of communication about this that kind of says, well, this is already freedom, and then stops there. Well, fair enough, but, to this mind here, as it kind of issues forth words, I just feel, well, yeah.
But it's annoying in a way, like people that can't, because if they could see the perfection that's that everything is already realized, that they wouldn't be hung up on non-dual speakers thinking that they have something extra, because it's not a mind thing that they have. So they don't have any authority and they don't have any particular wisdom. They really don't. There's nothing to stop them thinking for themselves and becoming much more authentic than any speaker, to be honest. It's not, the gain is not through the mind. It just isn't. So I think it's a real shame that people get stuck in this striving to want that. And actually it doesn't make you a better person. It really doesn't. That's the shame, because seeking is painful.
So one of the core things that often happens when this is seen is that a lot, maybe not all, but a lot of our projections fall away. So our tendency to see somebody out there who's got something that I haven't got and that I want, so I put them on a pedestal and I treat them as whatever, a spiritual teacher or a guru or whatever, and I sit at their feet, and that is quite likely to collapse. I mean, there's no absolutes about this, so it might not, but it is pretty likely to collapse and take a lot of our other projections with it when this is actually seen.
But I think if you don't own it, I think if you don't own this and express it in some way, you might retain a bit of that projection. So you still might be beholden to someone who's talking about this, or see them in some subtle way as an authority. So I think there's something about at least expressing this to, I don't know, to someone, a non-dual speaker, or writing about it, or talking about it with your friends, doing something just to really integrate it is really good.
That's resonating a lot with me, actually, personally, what you're saying. If
you've got a kind of community around you. I mean, we're very lucky here in London or close to London, because there's a community to be able to talk about this with, which is great. Yeah.
Well, there can also be a kickback if you leave the fold as such. Leave the spiritual arena, or a group or something, or the claws can come out. because somebody's got enlightened, maybe. You know, and there's no such thing really. It's the booby prize, isn't it? You know, but it's. I think going back to something, Dawn, you kind of said it in some way that, you know, it's a path unique to the individual. Not the individual. How can I phrase this? You know, I'm trying lost for words. Left to the pattern that's left. It's in some ways it's a lonely road, isn't it? And I suppose it does help to gravitate towards people. But here it's sort of you're left with your own devices, you know. And it dawned on me through my search that it was like, oh, this is absolutely my own path. You know, I got no help here as such. And there was a different feel to that. You know.
Yeah. You got to step into your courage. Like you got to do with this, and that sometimes comes for me. I had to get in touch with my anger. It was something I never had. I was, you know, I just never was able to access that. Just like to get in touch with, you know, all the deeper emotions I didn't like, to really be able to express this and to talk about it in my own way. Yeah, I think it is hard, and it is coming into your own authority is. But the courage comes with it, like it really does, and that's transformative. And then you don't give a damn about awakening, because awakening it's neither here nor there. After a certain point, it's like, you know, it's not about that anymore somehow. You know. Yeah.
And what about the locus of control, like free will? I make decisions. People would normally think I make a decision. I'm in control of my life. Where does that happen for you both? You know.
You're the big free will.
I just go.
You're the free will man. Okay.
Just going back to what you were previously saying, I think there can be a lot of spiritual blowback from this. And I have had a very, very angry Buddhist on my case from my past, because I'm not going to give any details, but I really have. So yeah, in the spiritual world, it can generate a lot of anger. This can, because it seems to negate so much of what is valued in that world. And now, what was the next question? Oh, free will.
Free will.
Oh God!
I know, but I have to bring it in, don't I? Like, you know,
you have to bring it in. Well, forget it. You know, forget free will. It's a dead duck. Will that do?
It doesn't matter.
No,
like, it doesn't matter. And you know, and there is stuff you want to change. There's stuff you can do if you don't know what you want. You can meditate, get in touch with your emotions, because without your emotions, you won't be able to know what you want anyway. So you know that there's things you want to get healthier. Get express yourself more. You know, there's loads of stuff you can do, you know, to get, you know, if you've got emotional flashbacks and stuff, just to learn to have somebody you can express something with, to emote with, and not just sitting with your feelings, but really expressing them as well. You start to be able to think and feel at the same time, stuff like that. There's loads you can do, you know, in a sense to change things.
To link these two things up, I mean, a lot of that spiritual blowback is about, you know, daring to say that there is no free will, because free will is it's kind of like the holy of holies on the spiritual path. It's the holy of holies anyway for individuals, but particularly on the spiritual paths. And, you know, if you look at the kind of more extreme ones that are developing on the American continent, you know, like the laws of attraction, the secret, the cosmic ordering service, we have ultimate power over our reality. Everything that happens in our reality is because of my own precious free will or whatever. It's a tremendous insult to that. Yeah. To suggest that it's possible to see through free will. So, yeah, a lot of the kind of, you know, if you hear about people being thrown out of their guru groups and their meditation groups and their spiritual groups because of this, a lot of it will be around that particular question. You know, how dare you question this precious gem that we each have inside us of free will?
It can be, it's going back to the fact of like, it depends on the person who's hearing the message. Can I ask, can you actually get a feel for people's thinkings? Because you've seen through the thinking patterns yourself. Could you actually feel someone's thought processes in some way? Do you get an idea where the person's coming from? Myself, I was kind of in a group where it was like a self-help sort of setting. And I found it relatively easy in some respects to see through where they were caught, because I had seen through some aspects of thinking myself, you know. Is it easier to help people, maybe?
Well, only because there's more space, I would say. I mean, are you talking about being able to, like that empath thing of feeling other people's feelings, or just,
I'd be some way empathetic in some respects, but having seen through the hooks of the thinking patterns.
Oh, yeah.
Where they get hooked on.
It simplifies the mind, doesn't it? And you see people getting caught in a lot of rationalizations, and they can't just say a thing. It's all very complicated to accept things as they are. And this is how it is, it's actually very difficult. So you're starting from a much easier point to change things, or to look at things, or, yeah.
And you said it simplifies the mind. That really sprung out at me there. And the mind, we think it's massively complicated, but it's only sort of one thought deep, is it?
Mm.
Yeah. One thought, yeah, it is, and it's not, and it's all okay, and you're so much more aware of what's going on in that anyway when it's there, and it's not, it doesn't impact the same way at all.
And the collapse of projections is also relevant here, because to the, whatever extent our own projections collapse, then it's just kind of becomes obvious in a way, that we see where other people are at more clearly. Because if we're looking at other people through these great clouds of our own projections, then that's what we're seeing. We're seeing our own projection. We're not seeing what they are.
I think that can annoy people, though, because there's no authority. You're not seeing it in anyone. And so you when you do start thinking for yourself, it's like, well, you're not buying anybody really what they say. If it doesn't resonate, it doesn't resonate. Out it goes. It doesn't matter whether it's Carl Jung or, I don't know, Joe Bloggs. It doesn't matter. It's like, we're all the same, it's just one mind, isn't it? Operates fairly similarly. So
this overthrows all authority. It overthrows all authority. Authority becomes meaningless. The authority of institutions like churches and temples, also the authority of great people. Yeah,
we have that as well. We have the collapse of certain traditions, like here in Ireland, there would be a collapse of the church, as far as I could see. And, there's a collapse of the financial system. You got the cryptocurrencies, DeFi, all these aspects of technology are happening, and there's collapse of banking. We're in some, I think we're in some sort of a change right now. And, maybe non-duality and this sort of teaching, as we could call it, it has its place now. What do you think?
Well, it's becoming more common, isn't it? But I don't think it solves everything. But it's, I think people do think it's going to solve everything. I don't think it will. Not on its own. I think, because if people still remain repressed and everything else, I don't think it will. So.
And if a lot of people embrace this, we're getting into sort of what Eckhart Tolle says, a new earth, is coming into my mind. It's hard to keep away from that subject. And some gurus would bash Eckhart, it's a ridiculous concept for an awakened being to try and introduce, to reshape society again after coming out of it as such. But is it needed, what do you think?
Well, if you have instead of having psychopaths running the world, you have awakened psychopaths. They'd be more dangerous. I don't know, as long as you remain an awakened doormat, you're going to be enabling the awakened psychopath who's running the world. I don't know, that's what I mean. There's you need to be in touch with who you are as in the personal realm, though nobody owns that. There is no person, etc. But you still need to know who you are, be in touch with your emotions and able. That's how you come into ethical being, because I don't think that's a given. Not with this. You're more empathic, you're more loving, you're more compassionate but learning what's right and wrong, that comes from knowing that comes from the story that's not big in the non-dual circles, but actually the story is really good to give reality test to what people are saying and to know the difference between right and wrong and stuff. That's where I'm coming from.
And there's a sort of integrity and authenticity about this, what I'm hearing, you know? Would you put that in words on it?
Yeah, but that's learned, and that's mind. That's awakening in mind. That's not this, but I think that's something that needs to happen as well.
I was going to say there's two great stories or narratives that humans seem addicted to, and they're opposite stories. One is that we're all going to hell in a handcart and everything's getting worse and worse, and we're, you know, careering towards the ultimate catastrophe. And the other, of course, is that everything is kind of, you know, directing itself towards some marvelous conclusion and kind of paradise and heaven on earth. And I mean, all I'll say is they're both, you know, wherever Eckhart Tolle stands on either of those, I'm not quite sure. But they're both equally stories. You know, they're narratives that, you know, we like to entertain ourselves with.
What about time, Richard? What's your take on that? I mean, really, it's the biggie, isn't it? Like, you know.
If it's the biggie, I think free will is the center.
Free will is number one, right?
I think they're really the two biggies. But if you want the Holy Trinity, we can throw in time. Like, yeah, all I can say about that is that there is something about, you know, in the dropping of the self, the seeing of this, whatever the hell that means. All I can say is time is seen through. It's just seen that this is timeless. There is no time. There's no time. And then, of course, the challenge from the member of the audience who's feeling a bit arsey on a Saturday afternoon is, are you telling me that you didn't have breakfast this morning and didn't get the train to come here today? To which, you know, the only answer I can make is, yeah, there is a character who apparently lives in time. Of course there is. Of course there is. And yet there is just the timeless, there's the eternal timeless. And in a way, one of the things I often say is, in a sense, this is one of the most challenging things that you can say, that there's no time, because it's not, obviously there is. Yeah, there is to the character, because that's what the character swims in. The character is like a fish swimming through water. The character swims through time. And yet I also suggest that in another sense, it's kind of perfectly obvious. You know, that there is, as a lot of people say who are talking about this, there is just this. Because that's what timelessness means. No past, no future, just this. You know, and if that sounds like an astonishing metaphysical statement, it isn't, you know, in a sense. You know, one of my phrases, I say, in a sense, it's kind of a statement of the bleeding obvious in a way. So even though this has memory and expectation and knows what it was doing this morning and expects to be having supper tonight or whatever, that's the character. And yet it's also obvious that there is just this. No past, no future, always, eternally, irrevocably just this, in which there is no time.
And the past is very lovely. When this is seen, I think it's very lovely as well. So, yeah.
It's a mystery, you know. And, you know, if anyone's listening to this and puzzling over it or whatever, well, forget it. What does it matter? You know, if you're at a bus stop, maybe the bus will turn up. Maybe it won't. You know, maybe there's time in which the bus will turn up.
Is our focus on maybe would people's focus be on objects and things and ideas too much? It seems like we're caught in, it's a bit like life's a movie and it's on a screen, you know, and the screen is timeless and the movie isn't. But the movie is only an appearance and life is only an appearance. And it's a bit like, you know, for there to be time, there has to be timeless aspect.
I don't know, like life is precious. I mean, it's so precious, and the story is precious as well. I mean, that, you know, you don't have to abandon that. It's beautiful. And it's also, I mean, the insight you've got into your own when you've seen this you've got so much insight into everybody else's, and all that story of suffering. It's beautiful, you know, but it's redeemed as well, because there is no real failure in there. There's no, you know, all of it's okay. So all of it's accepted, and it's beautiful, I think. So you know, the whole personal experience, I think is great, and not to be discarded or seen as anything less, because that's what we've got. You know, life just goes on as before. It's experienced slightly differently, but yeah, no. So yeah, I'm careful with that one.
Sometimes people say that this communication, it's very cold. It's very cold.
Yeah.
The opposite. Absolutely the opposite.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear you talking about that, actually, because, you know, it can be cold. You know, you introduce yourself, well, what's the story? There's nobody there, and never has been. There's no one there, and that's it. There's no one there. And that's the end of it. Thanks. You know, it's like, it's, there's something resonates there, Dawn, what you're saying. And Richard, you're right. I think it can be cold. And just in my side of life would be kind of like the creative aspect. Why don't I just create the best picture I can? I know it goes in the bin at the end of the day, along with the scribbly note, you know, goes in the bin too. And all the bookcases fall down, no matter what sort of stories they have. But it's a bit like, why not paint your life as great and as fantastic as you can make it anyway? You know?
Oh, yeah. Because that desire, I mean, the desires that fall away, I mean, after the honeymoon period, there often is that desire to self-actualize as well. Because, you know, the desires that fall away tend to be the metaphysical ones anyway. So the more kind of intrigue and drama types, where the desires that come back are the things that, you know, maybe gifts and maybe things you were actually good at that you got overlaid with conditioning. So you maybe your self-esteem isn't so low now that you can actually bring your life into alignment with those original kind of gifts and stuff that you had. So I think it's beautiful. And if you ignore the story, you're not seeing what was there that you left because of suffering, or that was overlaid by suffering, or overlaid by your parents saying, you can't do that, or whatever, you know. So I think it's great. And, you know, you can change your life with this as well. So.
Yeah, I like that fact that's where you're coming from. You know, it's refreshing. Yeah. And like, you know, if there's nobody there and that's it, like, why not live a fantastic life as well? I mean, you know, why not? It just makes sense. I mean, is there something wrong with doing that if it's false? You know, I would say to certain teachers, maybe not to you. I'm just saying, as in, some people would say, you know, there's nobody there and that's the end of it, an end of story. You know, sit in a rock and a nappy. You know. You know, like,
and everything's down on hope as well. And actually, hope has its place. It's just, you know, some people have malignant hope as well, when, you know, where they can't give up on something. But hope can be beautiful too. And I think a lot of people are down on that, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's all allowed, all of this stuff. And you can bring back a lot of stuff that you did neglect, like, because, you know, energetic experiences aren't very important, et cetera, bullshit, you know. They're very exciting, actually, and you can learn a lot from them too. So there's lots you can bring in if you want.
Yeah, this allows everything. And, you know, probably in a fairly obvious way, that can also be very, very challenging to people, because it allows everything, including everything that we don't want as well.
Yeah, and that's where spiritual bypassing can be seen too. Yeah. If we don't want certain aspects, we're running into spirituality to avoid certain things, maybe, you know. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's, I like the thing of everything is allowed. That's the way I kind of would see things as well.
When I first came across this communication, I didn't understand anything at all. I don't know how long well, maybe I never understood any of it, but I really sat there puzzling. There's something about it that hooked me, but I couldn't understand it. But I did get that after spending many, many years around different spiritual groups, there was just such an air of freedom around this, because there was none of that kind of spiritual uptightness crap.
Yeah. Yeah, and freedom is the thing, and people don't want to be free. I think a lot of people, they want something to hook on to that they can claim to be theirs. And as soon as they claim something, in my eyes, it's dead, isn't it? I mean, what's a dead concept worth? I mean,
yeah, certainly some religions and some spiritual paths and like that, they're straitjackets
Yeah.
into which we willingly place our arms and say, "Go on, buckle me up at the back, so I can't move anymore."
Yeah, no, it's I get with that. I sort of think of the concepts and the whole looking for the sacred and actually visually seeing the sacred. I mean, wow, you know, when awakening happens, if that's visible, it's like, wow, it's actually known by looking. It's like the stillness and the beauty that's there when you're not there is just amazing. You know, all the spiritual texts, they can only point at that, I guess, but they don't. Yeah,
the shock of seeing that everything is sacred, the shock of that, and the shock of seeing that, you know, everything is still. It doesn't matter how much it's moving, everything is stillness. And the shock of seeing that, you know, everything, recognizing that everything is silence. It doesn't matter how much noise it's making, everything is silence. And then that thing, okay, so I spent, you know, 3 years sitting in a monastery halfway up a mountain in order to experience stillness and silence. And there's just as much stillness and silence in Piccadilly Circus or the middle of Birmingham.
That's what cities are built with. They're built out of nature, aren't they? I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, cement blocks come from you know, beautiful surroundings. They're dug up and they're made, and everything is nature, isn't it? In some way, you know.
Yeah. But,
you know. Anyway.
In actual nature, it is kind of more obvious. I mean, there's something about staring at a tree that is nicer than, like, I don't know, the energy of that is just, I mean, there's something about the samadhi states that seems to like nature and outdoors as well. I think you sink deeper into this somehow. It resonates more.
So you'd feel that more in nature, Dawn?
Right. Or just, I feel it in queues as well, and in places where there's nothing that can be done as well. It's funny, it can go deeper. So if you're in a queue and there's nothing you can do, it tends to, like, I'm saying this, but if I was in a really horrible queue, I don't know how I'd feel. But like, yeah, there's a kind of really dropping into this that seems to just go deeper. Or I sit and have a cup of tea, the mind just dissolves in that, or being with somebody, talking, something. That can be really weird because it's just words and just a dissolving into that.
I could go and spend, you know, 6 months in a monastery halfway up a mountain, and that 6 months in total silence, and that 6 months could be filled with the frantic noise of my mind going and going and going. And maybe I could be standing in Piccadilly Circus surrounded by traffic, and there's just silence. There's the traffic as well, there's the noise as well, but it's all just silence. That's it. That's a tremendous. I want to throw in again, you know, to a dedicated spiritual seeker as I was, that's a tremendous shock.
It seems like it. Yeah. That there's just screaming silence is what I'm hearing. As such.
This is what?
There's like screaming silence.
No, not screaming, just silence. You know what I'm.
Boring silence.
There's just as much silence in rush hour traffic as there is in the most ancient Buddhist monastery. There's no difference. In the same way that there's just as much stillness in the traffic roaring round Piccadilly Circus as there is in the Buddhist monastery.
But it is different degrees. It can, well, in my experience, it can become quite drunken, or it can become less so. So there's different degrees of drunkenness of that. You like, it's not always drunken at all, but yeah.
And there are preferences. I mean, like you just said, I mean, there's a preference here maybe for sitting on a bench in nature rather than sitting on a bench in Piccadilly Circus, but sitting on a bench in Piccadilly Circus is okay too.
The difference between silence and nothingness, it seems, I suppose I'm trying to integrate this through some sort. I'm trying to be the devil's advocate, looking at it from like silence. You hear it maybe, or it's the loss of sound, and nothingness is some sort of sight or something. How is that felt? How is that discerned? Silence and nothingness. How is it felt or seen?
Well, emptiness is just seen. I mean, it's just known, and it's just obvious. The silence is a quality, and it's quite a drunken quality. There's just a sinking into the emptiness. How would I explain that? It's a quality that's seen in everything, a quality of love. It's, as I'm talking about it, I'm really dropping.
Talk about that, Dawn. You mentioned love a lot. I mean, we think love is in relationships, but this is talk about. You mentioned love a lot, and I haven't heard non-dual speakers mention that much actually. And just talk a bit more about the love that you feel with that.
Well, it's just I guess, I mean, that's hard to describe as well, because it's not the same as falling in love. Maybe you could compare it to that in a little bit, just because I guess because there's no otherness. So there's I mean, I've heard lots of people say in loveness with everything, but there really is. And I think it's something to do with everywhere is home as well. So it's almost oceanic. It's like there's a womb-like quality to this, but it can be amplified or just very, very quiet. And it depends. It can really ramp up at times as well. For me, I find it does go up and down, but yeah, it's just that intimacy. And I think so when you're with somebody, you're so much with them, whereas before you wouldn't be. There'd be that self-obsession would be there. So it's just this openness to all of them, and to and an acceptance from where they're at or where they're coming from. Even if you're telling them to bugger off, it's still there. Like, but
in a loving way.
in a loving way. It's all loving.
It's the absolute heart of this, because it may be there are individuals out there who experience it differently, but it seems to me that until, I'll call it unconditional love, until unconditional love is seen, there isn't an end to a seeking person.
To think of enlightenment, in some people, they go along this road and it's like they're going to die. Like your book is, I Hope You Die Soon. Like, what a terrible name for a book.
Well, it hasn't sold any copies.
I thought that I bought one. I have. I was the only person.
I only sold one copy.
But what about death? I mean, it seems like a terrible thing to mention, and people run away from it. What about
it? It really does take the sting out of it, and I wonder, like, so the fear of death seems to go in this. I imagine if I was facing death, I'd be terrified, because I'm also afraid of flying. But now it's, instead of the night before, it's when I'm actually sat in the aircraft and the engines go revved up, I'll get frightened, and then as soon as it's up, it's fine. I'm fine. So I think it's different. It does, because I had such existential fear of death, and I was just like, why? I couldn't understand why. I thought life was so awful. How could anybody find this in any way livable? That's where I was coming from. So for me, it's complete shock that death somehow doesn't seem to matter. Weirdly, yeah. Whether it's just because this isn't owned, I don't know. Because you sort of think, well, death is the end of the physical, but it may not be the end of the experience. Who knows?
Richard, your take.
you're not going to get away. I'm not going to let you out alive with this.
Just two things come to me, if I can remember them both. The mention of flying brought this to me. Death and dying are two different things. So, fear of dying or unease about dying, fear of death, unease about death, they're not the same thing. And now I've forgotten what the second thing that was coming to me. I think the unknowability, becomes clear. And so the mind is quite likely to stop. If the mind was worrying it at it before, which a lot of minds do, obviously, I think it's quite likely that the mind may drop it, or may drop at least some of it, because, the unknowability the unknowability of everything becomes clear. And so everything includes, therefore, the unknowability of death. And so, there can be likely to be some relaxation around that.
Unless you've experienced hell.
Oh, do you want to talk more about
not
that?
really.
Yeah. Shoot. Let's hear about hell.
Oh, that's it.
It's not pleasant. It's not. Because the last time I was in hell, actually, I just remember one of my hell experiences. I thought, well, I'm out of the physical, you can't hurt me. And this demon bit me. This fucking demon bit me. And I was
like a ghost demon thing.
Like demon. I mean, they're definitely not. They're more like sort of William Blake picture, sort of drawing sort of thing. But they're definitely not human. And it bit me, and it really hurt. So I was a bit annoyed about that. Sort of thought, you can't get me. Actually, if you do have experience like that, apparently thinking of the light or even praying or anything like tends to get you out of that. It seems so. If you have that, just sing a hymn or do whatever it takes. You don't need to believe, but just do, from the NDE stuff. So just in case anybody's watching this and they're worried.
So it's like heaven and hell, good and evil. Does that run?
I don't know. These experiences happen so, I mean, I don't know whether they have any reality or not, who knows, but the experiences like of visions and stuff are as real as this, so, people don't like to talk about this today. I don't know.
No, but everything's allowed.
No, heaven's lovely, obviously. Heaven's very, very nice. But I didn't. This has all been recent for me, and 2.5 years ago. So I didn't realize. It does make you wonder about this, how, other dimensions, whatever this is, I don't know.
I've heard people talk about other dimensions as such. And one of my friends, he had an awakening, and he said there are multiple universes here.
Yeah, it could be.
Which is quite profound, yeah.
Mm.
Dawn, what's your take now on seeing you seen through heaven and hell? What would your take be on life? So how do we approach life? Because I'd want to go to hell. Like, I've been there myself as well. So,
I'll just pray, sing. Yeah, apparently they don't like that. I don't know. Well, I don't know. There's no not to do. These experiences just happen. I don't know. Approaching life, I don't know what to say to that.
I was watching a program on sort of like consciousness and how we affect things around us, and music has a various different shape. And if you meditate on water with love, it changes into crystallization form of a beautiful pattern. And, it kind of like if everything's love and good, it changes everything around you as such. And if you're negative and, dark, in a dark place, maybe, that you attract that as well. Would you think that's true?
It seems like in ND, near-death experiences, manifestation really works, that sort of thing, like where you change reality just by a thought, but also in lucid dreams I've experienced that, where you want to change a scenario, you can do it by a thought.
By dreaming.
Not always, because it doesn't always work like that, but it's much, much closer to the NDE sort of experience, where but we're going into the...
yeah, okay.
we're not right.
You were nearly going to go there, but you didn't.
I love all this stuff. I do. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, it might be a bit much. Yeah, I heard you talk about it briefly on another podcast, the heaven and hell thing, and I was like, wow, it's something you never hear about again, people don't want to
Well,
talk?
Tim Freak's actually very good in the metaphysical stuff, actually, I think. But that's, yeah, I like his take on it. Pure imagination after death, pure imagination, because in a way, a dream is a spiritual experience, isn't nobody saying that as well? And, it's just arising. So it's, yeah, who knows?
And you mentioned the subconscious, that subconscious stuff can come up. Does that veil kind of drop between the conscious mind and subconscious?
Yeah, sometimes these experiences reveal unconscious stuff as well, and it really hits home, and that's what I've experienced with it, for sure. It can be, if you haven't integrated stuff, sometimes it'll come up in that form as well, and there's no getting away from it. Then that's been my experience. It's just like you don't want to deal with stuff, bang, which is quite exciting as well. Because there really isn't the fear around these energetic stuff, no matter how dark it is. There is at the time, but
there's no judgment running there, Dawn, it seems, by you. Like between good and bad. Actually, that's interesting. There doesn't seem to be a judgment. You're like, okay, it's exciting, and you're going, yeah, it's good and it's fine. Like heaven and hell, you're going, okay, this is interesting. That's quite fascinating. There's no judgment on the whole thing, Yeah.
As long as you don't stay there, right? I don't know if you do that at the time, but yeah, no, it's a massive curiosity about it all. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of people. Oh God, sorry.
No,
sorry. Just.
Or just like what's unknowable isn't interesting, but I find it fascinating because even though we can't know for sure what this is, but.
And unknowable, it's not like there's someone that doesn't know as such. There's unknowable is just a word you're putting on it. It's like, I don't know, and it's all unknowable. That's the position again, isn't it? There must be some sort of freedom in the unknowing, like a bewilderment of some sort.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, of course, because it's freedom from belief, and it's a lot less annoying when you're around someone who's like that. I have to say, there's always being made into something, and then this always becomes evangelical or in your face. So yeah, it's because it just seems more true. I mean, how the hell can you know what any of this is like?
And any one of the two of you don't know, am I right? What this is? I'm just being so.
Something just clicked with me there. What you said then. Absolutely, I don't think I sort of realised that quite so clearly before. That it's the kind of around whatever the story is, whatever the experience is, no matter how kind of everyday or no matter how extreme and extraordinary, it's just there's something about that freedom from belief around it. And that freedom from a necessity to build, a kind of story about it that I then attach myself to with desperation. And then before I know it, I've written a holy book about it, and I've got a priesthood about it, and maybe I've built a stone building, which is a temple to it or whatever. It's the freedom from that.
And then there's a business built around it. Yeah.
This what?
There's a business built around it then. It's a bit like what they did with Jesus,
Of course, yeah, of course. And then it becomes part of the power structure, and then, and all of that. And then you maybe somebody's a heretic, so they have to be killed. The whole story. We know how it works. And to be free of that kind of necessity to turn, what is essentially, the unknowable into something which is known and pinned down, and now I can make profit and power out of it. It's tremendous freedom. Yeah.
And freedom is the buzzword, I could talk to two of you all night, and I got to be mindful that it's probably usually for an hour and things like that, but I've had the most delightful time asking you questions and stuff resonating, and it's been fascinating. It wasn't what I expected, but it was delightfully something else. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, really. Yeah, I really have. So,
yeah, it's been good. Yeah.
And hopefully you come on the show again in the future, the near future, hopefully, you know. Folks, I meant to ask, touch a bit on the talks and things you do. And you got a website first, richradsylvester.com. Am I right?
That's right.
Okay, and they can get details there of meetings you do and talks you do, probably do online, Richard. Am I right? Yeah.
Well, yes, at the moment, but there are hopes that there may be live talks in September in London. Obviously, it depends on the situation, but there are hopes and plans that live talks may happen in London in September. Do you want to say any more about that?
Yep.
Go on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got my first one coming up in September as well.
Your first meeting.
Yeah, so in London in the 10th.
Good luck with that. Yeah, where is it, or do you know where it is going to be, or anything? And you got a website coming up as well.
It's on the meetup. It's Philadelphia Association, so it's on the 10th. So yeah, that's
great. And you got a website being made on dawngarland.co.uk.
Yeah, that's right.
Running yet, but...
And there might be a meeting in Northern Ireland at some point, maybe in October. I'm not sure. That'd be on Meetup as well.
Great.
There might be a Saturday afternoon later in September also at the Philadelphia Association. But again, it's because of the situation, people are going to have to look at the website or be on the email list or something like that, because it's still a little bit uncertain at the moment, the situation. Yeah.
Sure, and it'll pass through, I'm sure. And I'm going to put your details in the description below. And again, folks, it's been really nice. Yeah, thanks very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, it's been good. Great talking to you.
You're more than welcome. Thanks, folks.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.